sorry. 3 minutes.
In the Prairie Eagle Club or something, just before. And she emailed me recently, and they have like a $250,000 grant, so they're gonna build a new big house.
Oh, wow.
Do the water.
Yeah, expand. That'd be good. That should put up a pretty good system. Not that anything's cheap, but.
No, the people there were like, it's five people that run it. And they are really dedicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Sarah runs the brewery in town. Bigger.
You know,
Yeah, I can't. Might come to me. I can't remember. Yeah, so she's out at the institute, and then he was. Yeah, they opened like a tap room and brews a beer.
yeah, and her parents moved to World War II. And we did have to look.
Yeah.
And she moved back to full-time, and I've met them a couple of times. I don't know if you're familiar with the Brothers Seacoast, it's right along the highway where you turn right at the end of Marquette.
Yeah. Okay.
David Brothers, they were organic farmers.
Okay, I think I'll get started. Good evening. My name is Mark Broman. I'm the Executive Director of Wachiska Audubon. And Wachiska is an independent chapter of National Audubon with a geographical area covering 17 counties in southeast Nebraska. You can follow us on our website and also on Facebook. I've got several announcements tonight, so I'll get right into them. I want to remind everybody about this Sunday, October 12th. We've got Prairie Pines Partners in the morning is going to have Roots and Restore Wellness Day. They're going to be doing yoga and forest bathing and things like that. And they'll have all kinds of folks out there with healing and things. And then at 4 o'clock, we've got Wendy Bantam, our new office administrator, is going to do the warm-up for the main band, which is Lloyd McCarter and the Honky Tonk Revival. And so from 4 to 8, we'll have live music. So it's a free music. It's a free concert. It'll be held in the Arboretum at Prairie Pines. There'll be food and drink for purchase, including wine and beer. And we'll have soft drinks and hot dogs. And Pepe's has some wraps, some vegetarian wraps. So we'll have a little bit of everything. We've got several volunteers that have signed up. We still have room for a few people if you want to help out. Or if you want to bring cookies or brownies in baggies, that would be great. We'll make those part of our sales for an extra profit. But if you do want to help out, just get a hold of me or Wendy, and we'll see if we've got a job for you. Wendy will be in a minute, and then she has a couple announcements she wants to make for her volunteers. So I'll wait till she comes in, and we'll let her address those issues. The October newsletter has the fall birdseed sale form in it. I also brought some forms tonight, and you can also go on our website, but I do have order forms out on the counter. We do need to have those postmarked by Monday the 13th. So if you haven't gotten your orders in, go ahead and pick one up tonight and get that postmarked by Monday. So we've got them out there on the table. The delivery will be October 24th from 3 to 6 Friday, and Saturday, October 25th from 9 to 11. If you can't make it out one of those days, we can probably hold the seed since we're going to have it out at our place. So the delivery will be at the new office out at 112th and Adams, so 3100 North 112th. So if you can't make it to pick up your seed, just let me know and we can hold it for a few days. I'm usually out there every day except if I'm gone to meetings or something, so we can make arrangements for you to come out. We're also looking for some volunteers with carpentry skills. They've had a couple work days out there working with a couple folks from the Prairie Pines Partners and doing some work on some windows and doing some drywall and stuff like that. So if you're interested, let me know and get in touch with me. Then on Saturday, October 11th, which is this Saturday, the day before our big music festival, we'll be conducting a fall migration bird survey at Prairie Pines. We've not done a really good bird survey since we've been out there, and in the past they're just kind of been scattered. So Teresa Peller, our president, is going to be leading that effort, and we're going to meet in the parking lot by the Visitor Center at 8 a.m. So if you want to come on out, or if you have any questions, talk to Teresa tonight. But that'll be Saturday the 11th, the day before our big festival. Then on Saturday, October 18th, all Wachiska members and friends are invited to go out to tour the Wagon Tongue Creek Preserve. We'll meet at 2 o'clock out at the preserve, and manager Bill Tadigan will give us a tour, including the gardens of the sculptures that were created by the property owner Ron Parks from Bellevue. So the address is 323 County Road 30, Valparaiso. And Bill said, do not take any of the minimum maintenance roads. There's only 3 miles of gravel, but there's a couple cutoffs. And he said, don't take those. So if your GPS is telling you to take the cut across road, don't do that. But you just go up Highway 79, put it in your GPS, and you'll see it's just 3 miles off of the pavement. So again, it's 323 County Road 30. It's in the newsletter, but it's a tour that we're going to go out, and he's going to walk us around the property. I have not been out there. Scott Hingstrom was a professor, a wildlife professor, and he lived out there when he was a professor at the University of Nebraska. But anyway, it's got a big barn there, and then the sculpture garden, some birding, some prairies, and some trees. So it's quite a place. But if any of you knew Bill when he was the manager out at Rose Sanctuary, if anybody wants to carpool, get in touch with me. But again, that's Saturday, October 18th at 2. So I'll probably leave. He said it takes 30 minutes from downtown, so I'll probably leave a buffer. So I'll probably leave about 1 or a little bit after from somewhere if someone wants to meet up with me and ride out with me. So that's coming up. It is in the newsletter, so you can check it out or give me a call. Then we have another big event on Wednesday, October 22nd at 6:30. We're having a planned giving workshop at the Lincoln Community Foundation conference room on the 5th floor. Their building is 215 Centennial Mall. That's right across from the old Pershing. So if you remember where the old Pershing building was, it's right across the street from that. Chip Debuse, the Vice President of the Foundation's Development and Legacy Planning, will be giving a free workshop on planned giving. You can gain insight into giving funds, retirement funds, stocks, things like that to your favorite charities. There's free street parking after 6 o'clock, so you don't have to worry about parking. There's usually plenty of street parking right out in front of the building or on the edges. So that again is Wednesday, October 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And you can just come down and join us. Wendy's in now, so I'm going to have her come up and make a couple announcements about the volunteers, since she's lined a bunch of folks up, and so she wanted to talk about that. So Wendy, come on up, and we'll let you do that. So she's going to address some of the volunteers, and we had a really good turnout. So come on up, be on the mic so they can hear you.
Oh, I don't need this. Hi, everyone. So this is I just wanted to say a quick message to the wonderful people that signed up to volunteer. Thank you. You'll get an email from me. Those of you that have signed up to volunteer, you're going to email either late tonight or tomorrow before noon that has all the details, what to make sure you bring, where to meet, where to park, what time to get there. And once you get there, we'll all meet each other, our team, and then we'll just go out and have a good time. So look for that email from me. I just haven't had a chance to send it to y'all, so thank you. When you come to the show, don't forget to bring your own chair.
There you go. That's right. It'll be in the Arboretum. Otherwise, you'll have to either stand or sit out there. We'll try to get some tarps so people have a place they can sit down if they'd like. Got an announcement. Spring Creek Prairie is hosting Sparrow Fest Friday, October 24th through Sunday, October 25th. You can check out their website for details. Some of the events are ticketed and some of them are free. So that's Sparrow Fest out at Spring Creek, October 24th, 5th, and 6th. Then also next Thursday, October 16th at 7 o'clock right here, Dr. Deb Bathke, she was here and gave a talk to us. She's going to be, she's the state climatologist, and she's going to talk about the 2024 long-awaited climate change impact assessment. So that report is out. So it'll be right here, again, October 16th at 7 p.m. So if you've got time, come over to hear about that. There's a lot of controversy, I guess, in the plan, so I guess we're not even supposed to say the word climate change, but anyway, she'll mention it several times, I'm sure, that night. So that's it for the announcements. I do want to ask if there are any Wachiska board members to stand up and be recognized. I know Teresa's here and Ross is here. There's April, so good. So, and Chris and Kim, so thank you for your service. So we'd like to recognize our board and thank them for all the hard work they do. We'll take a few minutes and ask if there is any unusual bird sightings. This past Sunday and Monday, there was a lot of Swainson's hawks flying around Lincoln. I saw them on Sunday. I happened to look up and see them. And then I got a couple emails from people saying, hey, what's going on? And text saying, what are these birds? And I wasn't sure what they were. We've got some great video that Wendy posted on Facebook of one of our members took some video and posted it. So it's a great video so you can see it. But I was talking to Will Inselman at a meeting the other day from Lower Platte South NRD. Yeah. And Will actually did his master's thesis on the Swainson's hawks. So that's how he knew that they were Swainson's. They get in these big groups called kettles. And they group together and they head to Argentina, down to the Pampas grasslands. And once they get down there, they feed mostly on grasshoppers. Up here, they eat some insects, but there's more mice and snakes and things like that. But they're often confused with red-tailed hawks. They're about the same size, but there's a couple differences. Swainson hawks are a little bit smaller, a little bit slimmer, and they also glide with their wings just slightly above horizontal. versus if you see a red tail, they're like this, and then vultures have the V. But the Swainsons will be up just a little bit, but not a V, more of a U a little bit. And then also they have a long primary feather that sticks out, the third primary feather, and so it makes their wings look a little bit pointed. But some of the birds that I saw were almost black, and some of them were almost white. So there were thousands of them, both Sunday and Monday, that I saw. And like I said, we did post that on our Facebook page. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's very impressive. And I'm sure that they're still coming through. So keep an eye on the skies these next few days. So with that, I'll see what else people have seen. I know we've had a lot of flickers coming through. In fact, I had 2 hit the windows today out at the office. And we've even got stuff on the windows to try to prevent that. But one of them knocked himself silly and stayed on the ground for about a half an hour, but then he flew off. But we have a lot of flickers coming through right now and tons of robins. So what else have we seen out there? We got some bird sightings. Anybody have anything interesting that they've seen this week or the last 2 weeks?
Well, I had an immature, well, maybe not totally immature, rose-breasted grosbeak male come to my feeder just off of A Street. So maybe the second time I've ever seen a rose-breasted grosbeak at my house.
Okay. And Linda has lots of birds. She has lots of feeders out at her house. I've been over there before. Anything else? Well, keep your eyes out on the feeders and the skies because migration has definitely started, and so there's a lot of things out there moving around. Quick reminder, tonight's presentation and past presentations are available on YouTube, and so you can always look up old ones, or if you find one very interesting, you can recommend it to friends. Oh, Dean, you got a bird sighting?
No, I had
No.
a skunk issue with my feeders.
Skunk
My
in your
dogs
feeders?
got skunked. So
Oh, your dog got sprayed.
I'm a little frustrated about this bird feeding, but it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dean has to live across the street
I'm
from me,
hanging
so that
in
means
there.
I've got a skunk in the neighborhood. So Tim, what do we got?
I have a question. Does anybody know if this kettling occurs in the same place every year?
Actually, I read a little bit after I talked to Will, and they do kettle in the same places. There's a couple places up by Sioux City that they really hang out for a day or two, but they do tend to kettle at the same places. And they go all the way to Argentina, and the round trip is 12,000 miles. It's one of the longest of any of the hawks in North America. So they go all the way down to Argentina, and then once they get down there, they feed on the grasshoppers, like you said. But for a long time, they were poisoning the grasshoppers with insecticides, and they had mass die-outs. In fact, one of the reports I read had 20,000 dead Swainsons in a roost. 20,000 birds were killed because they were eating those sick and dying grasshoppers. But they did get the locals to stop putting as much spray on. Yeah, Tim?
I've seen videos on TV where they kettle around the Panama Canal area.
Okay. Okay, that's probably a marker, a cue on their trip down. So, yep. Dean?
There was an excellent program here the other day on public radio reference about the glass buildings and all this stuff and what's trying to be done to help to try to prevent that with birds. It was phenomenal, the number of kills, of hitting into these glass buildings and everything. But if you got like the PBS passport, you could probably rehear it. But it was an excellent program. But at least people are starting to recognize they have to start doing something about this with their architectural stuff.
Yeah, before Tom Lebetz retired from the University Museum down there, he was doing a lot of counting dead birds on campus, and there were some of the buildings down on campus were really death traps. I got a call from Omaha Audubon the other day, and they were trying to find a company that would commercially apply something on the windows because UNMC, the University Med Center up there, has some new buildings, and they want to do something with the windows. So I was trying to work with him and trying to find some place he could find. Like at Spring Creek Prairie, they have little squares on the windows. I noticed when I was out there. Some places have dots, some have stripes, some people put string.
They were talking, there's a special coating that they put on some of the windows that's been very effective.
Yeah, that's probably so you can get that direct reflection because that bird sees either sky or other trees, and so they just think they're flying into the sunset when they're actually hitting glass. Okay, any other birds? Yes, in the back.
We saw a lot of monarch butterflies this week.
Yes, we've got a few out there at Prairie Pines, and they were in the shelter belt. I noticed the other day, and in our garden there were a couple dozen. So yeah, so luckily we're seeing some numbers. Yep. Yes, Ross.
I think I saw a ruby-crowned kinglet.
Ruby-crowned kinglet. Okay.
Little brown bird with a red top. When I startled it, little red spot showed up on it.
Okay. Okie doke. Anything else? Well, we'll have some time afterwards to visit. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's presenter, Kyle Martins. Kyle's the Director of Conservation Programs for National Bobwhite and Grassland Foundation. He's originally from Sioux City, Iowa area. He received his master's degree from UNL in 2020, researching conservation program design, and is in his third year of the Natural Resources doctoral program at UNL. Cal splits his time between his home in Lincoln and his family's land in northwest Iowa. Tonight's talk, The Grassland Phoenix, Restoring Northern Bobwhites. Kyle will take questions at the end of the presentation. With that, I'll give you Kyle, and don't forget to stick around. I'm sure Kyle will stay around and answer some additional questions, and we've also got cookies and brownies. So with that, Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Linda's still here?
Yeah, I'm here. I think it's active.
Nothing.
Oh, you have to turn your mic on. Oh, wait a minute.
Green light?
Wait a minute. Okay, now try it.
Okay, that's better. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to present on this. Linda, also, could we lower this down just a smidge? Yeah, the projector a little bit.
Got it.
Please. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about bobwhite and a little bit of a storytelling more than hard science or bird biology. I'm not an avian expert, but as Mark mentioned, my master's was really designing conservation programs. So we're going to touch on a few different things, but we would be remiss, of course, if this worked for me.
Linda, does he need to point back towards you?
Let me make sure that okay, now try it. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to stand on this side. Hopefully that's okay. So, of course, I'd like to start with a little bobwhite call. Hopefully this plays. And as we're kind of waiting for the next iteration, there's a little bit of background noise. This is definitely a grassland bird, a savanna bird. You'll hear a lot of insects in the background. It's a pretty tranquil scene. Just quick question, who is unfamiliar with bobwhite? Just a couple? It's a very iconic bird, as you can tell from, if you can see that red dot. This is a male here. I like to call him Uncle Bob around the office. So kind of some facts about bobwhite. The current population, these are estimates of course, is about 5.8 million strong across its current range. That's a decreasing trend. I'm sure Wachiska, folks who follow grassland birds, they're not a species that's been doing well. We've lost billions of birds since the 70s. A lot of reasons why. We'll get into that momentarily. What's interesting about bobwhite, at least for me, it's a generalist. So you can kind of see in the habitat, fallow fields, I consider hay fields, not necessarily just a weed patch, hedgerows, native grasslands, and open savanna. So bobwhite really has a strong cultural presence in the southeast part of the U.S. We'll talk a little bit about that history momentarily. So the biology of bobwhite also is something that makes it very unique. It's a highly social bird. For a grassland bird, you're like, oh, what does that even mean? Well, so about this time of year, you'll have what's called a covey start to form. A covey will be that year's hatchlings, fledglings, they'll be adult size at that point, females and some males. So they band together. They're not always around one another, but they do stay within call distance. Really, the birds are highly susceptible into the late fall and into the winter. So at night, they'll basically back in, kind of like bison protecting a young calf. They'll back into each other for thermal protection. And at the same time, if a predator were to come, it's a strength in numbers. They'll disperse, likely startle the predator. If you've ever come up on pheasants before, coming up on a covey of bobwhite will startle the daylights out of you. It's something to behold. So moving through the winter, we have our covey formation. The population trend in a given year of bobwhite fluctuates a lot. So you'll see the number there, 80% loss is kind of an average. Every winter that mortality will happen. And there's a lot of reasons why. Bobwhite, they're small. I mean, you can fit them in the palm of your hand. They're not a large bird. So if there's heavy snows, they have a hard time navigating through that brush because they like grasses, for that protection from hawks. If the grass gets snowed under, they're really right there on the surface for potentially an owl, certainly a hawk, to make a pass at. They're also very susceptible to periods of drought. So if we come through the fall, it's extremely dry. That has implications for all sorts of species. Then you get a really tough winter where it's cold, again it's dry, high mortality. But in the spring, of course, good things happen. The call that we had heard the previous slide, that is the male looking for a mate. So in spring, they'll start to pair up, and then they will go off and breed. What's interesting, again, bobwhite being a social bird, a female may mate multiple times a season. So what happens to the clutch of eggs after she lays them? The male will actually incubate that egg, stick with that nest, and raise the chicks. She may go off and breed once or 2 more times, just kind of depending on the resources available. Each clutch has about 12 to 16 eggs. Certainly chick mortality, they're highly susceptible, vulnerable at that stage, which is why in the first hour after hatching, they're able to get out and walk around. So they're very quick. You got to be quick when you're when you're sought after. They can fly at 2 weeks, and then they're about full-grown size, 3 to 4 months. So when we hit the summer, what are they foraging on? It's, again, they're a generalist species. Their diet is pretty general. Plant vegetative materials, so think like berries, buds, things of that nature. The chicks, after they've fledged or left the nest, they need a high-protein diet to obviously put on that weight and get to adult size. So a little bit about the bobwhite. We know its habitat. We know what it likes, what it doesn't like. So let's talk about maybe where it's at. So here on the left is kind of a general historic range where bobwhite would and still can be found in some areas. So as you can tell, we're heading up the coast into the northeast, all the way down into Florida, Texas, into New Mexico. There's different species of quail here. And depending on the year, Montana's not represented, but there have been quail in Montana, again, just depending on the conditions available. So that population can expand and contract based on resource availability. So here on the right is this abundance data, relative abundance, which is really looking at the population of the bird relative to other birds. It's a measure of biodiversity, so other species that would be in that habitat. You can tell, obviously, this is the Appalachian Mountains. There obviously would be draws and population presence here, but if you can kind of see where my pointer is, there's some pretty large gaps. If you plop a city on where those large gaps are, that's urbanization. So we do have a lot of habitat degradation. Again, if you follow grassland birds in general, the loss of habitat is a primary driver. So this is a little bit in the weeds here, but I mentioned bobwhite's a species, the trend's been declining. Really started since the 70s. So on the left, again, the thing to note here, this is relative to Christmas bird count data. The trend goes down from the 60s. Of more interest to us here, this is actually from Nebraska Game Parks Commission. They do an annual survey counting that call we heard at the beginning of the presentation. So whistle count. This is not indicative of how many bobwhites are out there, but if you can hear the calls, you can count distinct males, it gives you an assessment really for where bobwhite's at. So this is actually from all over the state. Right here in the bottom left there is our statewide trend. I believe this data set starts at 60. So again, and all these kind of are indicative of this, bobwhite fluctuates. Like that is very normal. But again, if you were to draw a line, you would see a downward trend. So, this is a hen, bobwhite, by the way. Let's talk a little bit about their biology. So, just a pop quiz, can someone tell me what they see when they don't look at the bird here, when they look at the habitat? Anything jump out? Feel free to shout it out.
Grass.
Thank you. That's 2.
Cover, a lot of cover.
Yep, both of those are at play.
Edge.
The edge is a good one. This is a little bit of a trick question. So you see this kind of bare earth spot here? You need that navigation. So really, the elements that can be there are overstory, so like a pine savanna, that shrubby cover, and as Linda noted, the grass back here. But it can't be overgrown. Can't have too much thatch buildup. You can't have too much shrubby cover or encroachment, as I would call it. It stifles the bird's ability to move in the landscape. As I've mentioned, bobwhites are a sought-after species, not just for people to hunt, but for animals to feed. So they need to be able to move all the time, and then they need to be able to flush, meaning rise. A covey rise is what they call it. It's hard to do that in a monoculture of shrubby thicket. You're trapped underneath, a fox, a coyote could easily get you. You don't have the ability to escape that situation. So you need really 3 to 4 components for bobwhites to be successful, even though they're a generalist. So this is a picture from the south. I believe this one is Georgia. So when you're talking about kind of the bird's biology, why do we think a bird can do well here? You know, it has an overstory, so you can have some avian predation. A pretty easy accessible understory. You can get, again, coyotes, foxes, so forth. Raccoons are a big nest predator. So any thoughts on why this habitat, this situation works? I'll tell you. So notice if you were to draw little lines between trees and just guess the distance. Okay, let's say that's 3 feet, this tree to that tree, we'll call it 8 feet, 10 feet, so on and so forth. Having that open canopy does 2 things. It allows the grass to grow, and it allows a fire to come through and reset that understory. If this was left to its own devices, this is pine, you'd still have light penetration from the canopy down to the ground, but what you'd see is forest succession, where other species, until they're disturbed, would start to grow up. It would become very thick and very undesirable to bobwhite. So this is part of the reason they need that grass component. So this is a clutch here. Again, if you were to count, somewhere in 12 to 16, I tried to count. I had 16 myself, but that seems too coincidental to be perfect. What they'll like to do, again, with that grass, you know, we can't just imagine really a single species of blue stem and just assume that bobwhite's going to do well. This nest is actually built in a bunch grass, right? So you'll have a diverse array of grasses out there. They'll find one that looks appropriate, use some of this thatch here. It's not a hole by any stretch, but, you know, put themselves down and recessed again to make themselves less visible. And if we notice the coloration in that dry grass of bobwhite, other than its eye patch, which we notice, I'm pretty sure more than any other coyote that's out there, they're hiding pretty well in there. Doesn't mean that they're completely safe, but certainly helps. So again, the habitat components. We need diverse grasses and forbs. We need that shrubby cover, which I guess I neglected to mention, kind of does 2 things. So that provides predation protection, but it also provides thermal cover. So that's both the winter and the summer. Bobwhites without that cover get extremely hot. That can cause unsuccessful fertilization during the breeding period. They like to be under shade, as we all do. So some of the things that have changed and why bobwhite is declining is really small-based agriculture. I'm sure a lot of us have experiences on the family farm. Those were often smaller farms where they'd have large hedgerows for various purposes, windbreak, shelter belts, homestead, even food, right? That provided a lot of protection and, albeit minimal, habitat connected, right? Because those field edges would be lined with hedgerows, you know, neighbor to neighbor, farm to farm. So as we've kind of shifted, I like this photo for 2 reasons. You really see no fence line, no hedgerow, and this affects a lot of other species, not just birds, without that navigability. Right behind it, another triggering factor we talked about is the expansion of residential areas. Again, we need places to live. I don't think anyone would push back on that, but we need to be very strategic about where wildlife is going to exist in our lifetime. We can't just have open development everywhere. Mark brought this up in advance, pesticides. So with a little bit I've shared, why would pesticides maybe be negative for bobwhite populations? No insects, and the chicks need that protein source, exactly. Which again, if you're not having reproductive populations, you're unlikely to have stable populations moving forward. Then the last thing I talked about is the use of prescribed fire. So prescribed fire has a lot of connotations. I don't think anyone enjoys necessarily seeing things go up in smoke. But grass, as I think most of us know, prairie grasslands evolved with fire. Removing that disturbance component, which also included bison and other grazers, removing that does a lot of detriment to grassland habitat and prairies in general. So for bobwhite, when we look at an area like this, as I kind of mentioned, this understory is staying clear because this landowner is using prescribed fire. It's not every year. You need to match how much you use prescribed burning for the environment that it's in. They call that like a fire return interval. This one might be every 5 to 7 years, but you need to reset that vegetation in a lot of instances, including Midwest grasslands. So what's happened to the habitat, right? We know about the birds. We know what the birds need. Why this is the connection to a lot of things happening in rural America, certainly today. What happened to the habitat? Well, if you look at, this is from USDA Economic Research Service, kind of look at the peak here in the blue line is the number of farms in million. Then our green line here is the average acres in the farm itself. And then this orange line is the land in farms. Well, you see that it's fairly stable, relatively speaking, the land that's been used to grow crops. What's changed is the amount of individuals farming and that farm size. So when you've heard the expression fence row to fence row, mechanization of agriculture, clean farming, a lot of those niche habitats aren't necessarily conducive to the way we farm. And that does have ramifications to birds like bobwhite. So this is another little more difficult chart to really wrap your head around. I'll just point out this brown line. This is the rural population, 70s to today, 2024. Notice some ebbs and flows here, again, downward trend. So again, we've lost really small farms. We've lost the people in the landscape that really would have stewarded a lot of these areas. And then people, as they move to the cities, need places to live. That has implications, again, for species, not just bobwhite. When I'd mentioned the 3 billion birds lost since the 70s, that landmark Audubon study, we've lost grasslands at an alarming rate. We continue to lose them every year. That has implications to every species that's listed here. It's a story that I feel like this group knows very, very well. What I think we often leave out of that conversation is the decline to rural communities. Where can we find land? These aren't from Nebraska. These aren't my photos, by the way. But can you think of a town, community, farmstead, a barn in a similar state, right? They've dotted the landscape for some time. When I think about the loss of grassland bird diversity, the loss of grasslands, I look at images like this. Small towns, the ability to live on the landscape in a rural setting, it's incredibly tough to do, which is why you see that larger shift happening in this country. So, enough doom, gloom, and all the bad stuff. What's happening with bobwhite conservation in this country in its range right now? That's partially what I work on for the Bobwhite Foundation. This group down here is, this is a trip I was on. This is Florida, longleaf pine ecosystem. Again, they're using prescribed fire. Has anyone heard of Tall Timbers, by the way? It's not a local group, but they've really been the pioneers in quail research since the 90s. And what they've learned is this right match of prescribed burning along with some other woody encroachment management and predator management, they've been able to make bobwhite flourish in areas of Florida, which would have been its historic range, which is great. This right here is a door knocker from a place in Georgia. Again, kind of indicative of that hunting culture, which was partially where Tall Timbers started. But up here, this is a conference I was at earlier with the NRCS and some other conservation groups. Bobwhite is bigger than just hunting. It's a very emblematic bird. It's a wonderful focal species. Its social dynamic thing, I think, can teach us a lot. Which brings me to this photo here on the right. This is a children's book released earlier this year by Joyce Ward, Where's Bobby? It tries to give kids a little bit tangible storyline to hang on to what happened to this bird. Because not that long ago, it was not a bird that was hard to find. You'd be pretty hard pressed to go out. Areas south of Lincoln still can be found, prairie pines. I've heard them out there, not as ubiquitous as it once was. So there's a lot happening, both from organization groups that I work for. You know, there's authors putting out books. There really is a revival for grasslands, and I think bobwhite is one focal species that we can all rally behind. So we've got a lot of enthusiasm. What do we need to do about it, right? This is one of the most accessible graphs that I could find. This is actually for Maryland. But what I want to point out here is really this line right there. So by managing grasslands into that open savanna, you know, we're providing habitat for quail, woodcock, cottontail rabbit. Again, this is Maryland. But if you start to go upward and see the span of other species that are utilizing that habitat, or maybe the edge someone pointed out earlier that is habitat accessible, managing for bobwhite as a focal species opens the door to other species doing well. The nice thing, the other thing I guess that I'd kind of noted on already, I got ahead of myself here, that diversity of grasses and forbs. We talked about bunch grass. I talked about all this stuff already. Getting ahead of myself. So, how do we do this restoration? Right, so up here, I'd already talked about prescribed fire. I'd call attention to the sapling right there. Running a fire through a grassland, I know it looks pretty tough right after the fact, but if you've ever come back a week, probably in closer to the month range, you see this flush of regrowth. And what that does, in addition to resetting the community, releasing nutrients for the prairie to grow back, it also staves off that woody succession, right? So this will only stay a grassland as long as nature allows it. If we stop removing grazing, if we stop using prescribed fire, trees will move in. So fire sets back that woody succession model. And what you'll see in a lot of areas in grasslands is a return of grazers, right? I don't think we're going to be seeing bison in every pasture around Nebraska anytime soon. That would be cool. However, grazing mimics that natural disturbance. And that's what prairies need. That's what species like bobwhite need. We need the ability to control that thatch layer, allow new species to come up, vegetative species, and grazing is a very effective tool. So here on the left, so that's the ag land management, forest management. Then we kind of get down to the restorative part if you're in an area that doesn't have grassland species. So this is a photo from my family's land. This was beans the year that we had done this. This is just 1 year later. There's all sorts of options for perennial seed mixes out there. For our objectives, we wanted as high a diversity as possible. So I think we planted 70. And then this is me here on the right. I just loaded it up in a little grass seeder. And then I just walked this acre back and forth more times than I can remember. And then we lightly disced it in. We used a lawnmower that weighted down a hog panel. Nothing super technical about it. And this is the results that we have. A lot of that foxtail you see in there is unfortunately part of the cover crop seed I used. Mistakes were made. But good success. So if we kind of look at bobwhite conservation and restoration, where it's happening, it's all over the Midwest, Southeast, and into the Northeast as well. And it involves really local chapters, such as everyone here in this room. Farmers and different cooperatives are also banding together around bird conservation and really keeping grass in grass by the use of cattle. It really can be a symbiotic approach, and there's a lot of groups that are doing that. Certainly state wildlife agencies like Game Parks Commission does that whistle count slide that I brought up earlier. There's soil water conservation districts, there's natural resource districts. Those are kind of your local boots on the ground. At a national and regional level, there's all these frameworks, right? Frameworks are basically management plans. But what I would say in the time that I've been in this space, what's different about these is they're unified. So, you know, you see this image here on the right. This is looking at the entire bobwhite range. There are individual locale, we'll call it regions of the U.S. where they have specific efforts, but they're tied in together through groups like the Bobwhite Foundation, where we're looking at conservation on a big scale. It's challenging to do, and we need all hands on deck to make this actually work. NRCS is also involved, less so currently when the lights are off, but when they come back on, they will be there. And I'd say when you boil all this down, what are we really trying to do at the local to national level? We're trying to figure out profitability to enhance rural landscapes. We cannot keep managing lands the way that we are. We have to do things different, and we have to figure out a way to support rural economies while we're doing it. Farmers need to live too, they need to eat. We've got to figure that out. The adaptive part is an interesting onset from probably the 2000s, which is, all right, we developed these plans. We're going to go out over the next 5 to 10 years using that plan, and then we'll come up with a new plan and start the whole process over again. So what adaptive management really means is this plan can evolve over time. So that keeps your strategy cohesive, your resources are in line, and you're making the most conservation effort, the difference on the ground through time. A lot of folks who have started these efforts have since retired. How does a generation like myself pick up the baton? How do people after me step into this role and continue to work on grassland bird conservation? We need approaches like this where we can plug and play. And this resilience component has a lot to do with how grasslands function, right? We need disturbance, we need resets, but that system is resilient, meaning it will come back. We're gonna have to push it a little bit. And I think the plans, the people involved, using what the prairie has evolved to do, we can create a very resilient approach and a resilient system.
Before, could you tell me a little bit more about those 3 slides? I can't quite see what the graphics display.
Absolutely. So this image here on the left, this is called the Coordinated Implementation and Monitoring Plan. This is something that I work on with partners at Clemson University, where we're looking at specific bobwhite quail known areas, and we're trying to track management, dollars invested, and bird response. So when we get into an area that has somewhat of a stable or breeding population, we can target resources to that area. Because I mentioned bobwhite, maybe I didn't, bobwhite are prolific breeders, right? 3 times a year, 16 eggs a clutch, that's a lot of birds. They can respond to management more quickly than many other species. So that's this is called SIP in short. That's the approach there. So if we know there's bobwhite, we have strongholds, we can come in and really change habitat in just a matter of years. This image here in the middle is called the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative. So grasslands are really endemic to this entire continent. The Southeast is no different, has a lot of different eco-type grasses. This is an effort, again, to really stave off grassland being converted. Either for monoculture ag, urbanization is obviously huge in parts of Georgia, which is the state I work in. Then here on the right, this is called Working Lands for Wildlife. So this is a program developed, a lot of different partners, but led by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. And it's hard to see, purple is what's in the legend here. And this is really building off known bobwhite populations. So if we went all the way back to that relative abundance image, and we overlaid this, that closely mirrors that, where we know bobwhites are, we don't have a good handle on their numbers. And the Working Lands for Wildlife Nexus is really partnering directly with farmers and ranchers. How can we bring habitat, bring it into kind of their traditional farming style? And there's a lot of ways to do it, and a lot of great groups that are leading that. But did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Sorry,
thanks.
those are small. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit, real briefly, kind of my family's journey. If you couldn't see those images, you're not going to see me standing way back there with my little hand seeder. So we started converting, or restoring, if you care to use that term, really those kind of fallow areas of our farm. We were hog farmers until I was a senior in high school. Those buildings have been left. We no longer are in that enterprise whatsoever. So we've gradually been removing infrastructure and putting it back into grasslands. So this was a bean field. This was the former sweet corn patch when I was growing up, but moved into beans since then. So this was March 2024. Again, just a couple months later, this is a lot of the oat nurse crop that I put in there. Again, if you've ever been around a restoration, weeds are going to move in at various times. You want some of that open competition, but you want filler, right? So oats are a really great species for that. And then this is just here last month of different angle, but same 1 acre. Obviously goldenrod, we have a lot of warm seasons in there. This is Canadian wild ripe, you see that long head. Forbs are coming. It's only a year, they say in a prairie restoration, the first 1 to 3 years, it's gonna look pretty tough. But after that, that forb diversity will start to come in. So we're very pleased so far. And then we have another 8 acres that we'll be doing here in November, which is a dormant seeding. Will there be bobwhite back at our farm anytime soon? I don't know, but I would like to assume that they'll come back someday. Maybe, we'll see. And that's my hired hand. That's my mom when we were putting that out there. So happy to take any questions.
We'll get the microphone real quick so that we can get one for the people at home with questions. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So where's the first hand?
Right up here in the front, I believe.
Right here.
Thank you.
I'm from northwest Iowa originally, so I'm interested in where your farm is.
It is north of Mobile on the D12 blacktop. So right between the Woodbury and Plymouth County line. We're just riding the edge there.
I was raised in Plymouth County,
Okay, whereabouts?
outside of Lamar's, Iowa.
Yep, that is about 12 miles north of me. So I know that area well.
And back here.
I would just, okay, I'd just like you to know and our members to know that we have 2 properties that Wachiska own that are currently in CRP program where the target species is northern bobwhite quail.
Oh,
We have a
wonderful.
grassland CRP contract on our Klapka farm, and we've got a restoration, a prairie restoration on our Wildcat property, and the target species on both of those are northern bobwhite quail. So I would offer you to look on a map. We've got GPS locations, and check out our Klapka farm, 400-acre farm, and our Wildcat Creek prairie, because our target species are northern bobwhite quail.
Yeah, are you seeing, well, I'm guessing you were seeing them, but yeah.
We see a lot of quail on our Klapka property.
Wonderful.
And then I have a question for you.
Of course.
Tree piles, when we clear trees,
Yep.
do they house predators or do they house birds?
That is a wonderful question. I would say it depends. So what he's talking about is kind of, generally speaking, called a down structure. So along those edges, these are kind of getting into the management tactics you can use, but let's imagine we've got our grassland here, and we've got a woody edge right there. You need to continue to open up that edge. They call that edge feathering. So what you'll do is selectively cut some of that shrub stuff out. You might leave some taller trees, you might try and knock it all back. So what he's talking about is that slash, that debris, you can pull that out from that edge and make a pile. That's called a down structure. So a down structure is good quail habitat, but the depends is what's it relative to, right? So if you don't have that grass component where birds can hide, navigate, travel, if it's just a down structure, it's, say it's been grazed down, maybe too low, I guess, in this sense, that's not going to be an effective use for bobwhite. They need those corridors, is what I'll call them. It's a great question.
Oh, here comes the mic right behind you.
What is the effect of the eastern red cedar, the junipers that are taking over the prairies?
That is another great question. Several fold. So eastern red cedar, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it is a native species to Nebraska, but it has pretty aggressive invasive tendencies. What does that mean? So back when, when prairie was prairie, cedar would have been confined to really rocky outcrops because fire would push that into areas where it couldn't burn over. So over time and how we manage, cedar is a prolific cedar, kind of like bobwhite, I guess. They'll put out on an individual female, it's somewhere upwards of 250,000 juniper berries per tree. It's a crazy number. Don't quote me on that. And basically over time, they're being dispersed by birds. So those shelter belts, windbreaks, where they're just dominant cedar, that's why they always say plant diversity. Those seeds are traversing up to 300 yards from that windbreak. A lot of great research out of UNL on this. Up to 300 yards, and they're getting viability, meaning the seed germinates. So with intact seed source and without disturbance, grazing really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot for cedar. They're still going to come up. You need fire or hay. You need that disturbance to knock back that woody encroachment. To really your question, what's it doing? Everything. We're losing a lot of great grazing ground to cedar encroachment. Once it gets above, I'm 6'2". Once it gets up past me, you might be looking at a 3 to 4 inch diameter stem. So how do you have to cut that? Well, you either have one person with a chainsaw combing hundreds of acres of prairie, or you get a machine. In certain areas, topography is not easy to navigate. The cost goes up based on the complexity. So a lot of folks just leave it. And then what happens when that one seed, 300 yards from the windbreak sprouts up, 15 years later, it's taller than all of us. It's starting to seed, sexually mature at that point, and the process continues. So it does a lot. It's a very big problem. But woody encroachment outside of just eastern red cedar is also mesquite is a big problem in Texas. So prescribed fires, a lot of that, there's climatic change. I'll leave that to brighter minds than I to pinpoint exactly what's going on there. The theory, if you will, is an abundance of CO2. And that's allowing trees to proliferate. I think more simplistically, that disturbance that stops woody succession, woody plants continuing to move on, we've lost that disturbance regime.
I'm originally from southeast Nebraska, Gage County. And at the time, Gage County and Pawnee County, when I was a kid in the 50s, that was thick with quail. People would come up, hunt all over, and it's just declined terribly, again, with the fence rows, the hedgerows, everything out, gone. And what is going, probably we'll never see those days again, but what is the benchmark that where you say that there is a success? Because all I'm seeing is going down. But has there been any really yet concerted effort with farmers to say, try to be a partner with the land? Is there anything being done through the university or anything? We talk about, I get depressed coming to these things sometimes.
Well, I tried to look at my hired hand. She's
I know, she's doing good. But no, has there been any real concern? I mean, we got to wake up here
Right.
farmers will go if it's feasible to them, and they all want nature too, but
Yep.
it just goes on and on here. And has there been any kind of, let's say, get our act together here and wake up? Because a lot of these people, of course, they're dying off on that those baby boomers, but they remember those days. They talk about it, but it still goes on, so anyway.
Yeah, somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. We know the numbers are going down, but we're not really doing anything in terms of a national effort to stop that. So it's a great point. I certainly feel the same way thinking about these things, brings a tear to your eye because there are focal species. 1 second, please. So what's happening on the landscape, the national scale? Part of the work that the foundation, National Bobwhite and Grasslands Foundation, we're working on is that SIP that I mentioned. So that's the right combination of incentives, the technical assistance, so folks know how to manage and what to manage for, and then the ability to follow up with really that trusted liaison. There used to be a heck of a lot more soil conservationists, wildlife biologists, and so on. So I chalk it up to you don't know what you don't know. If someone in your community isn't out there telling you how you can manage in line with what you're already doing, why would you know any different? It's just like, oh, I remember Bobwhite, and now they're not here anymore. So it's education and outreach. The other thing that I would note, anyone's familiar with precision conservation? So I'm going to do a little flip on you here. So there's precision agriculture and then there's precision conservation. So it's the same principle applies. Precision agriculture is really trying to target the use of nutrients and pesticides in a direct way. It uses some pretty advanced technology, but the rationale behind it is you aren't having to cover an entire field in anhydrous. You know where your soils are lower nutrient content, and you focus on planting back or putting in nutrients in those areas, same with herbicide, pesticide management. So precision conservation, what it's trying to do is taking those net drag acres where a farm, an area is unproductive for a variety of reasons. It can be too wet, the erosion can be too much, it could just always have been an underperforming area because of soil type. So with a lot of the technology that's out there, what we're trying to work with farmers on is why continue to plant, spend money in that area when it's dragging down your overall profitability? Why don't we put that in grassland? Or there's buffer strips. That's a program most of us are probably familiar with. But precision conservation looks at different CRP type programs. I can't remember the nomenclature on the code, but so all of this gets back to profitability. Really, that's the direction that we're moving to. We want to see healthy farms, healthy people. We need groups, again, all hands on deck, working directly in communities with producers covering this stuff. Because I don't think it's going to change any other way. When we sit back and let it continue to do what it's going to do, it does what it's going to do. Not to cut you off, did you have a question?
Is it too expensive to work with the cedars and biochar?
Yeah, so the question was, is it too expensive to work with cedars and maybe look at cost benefit of creating biochar? That's a great question. Folks at the Nebraska Forest Service have been working on this for some time. I think the problem becomes transportation. They've come up with all sorts of nifty devices. Biochar, if anyone's not familiar with it, is you take your root stock and you basically light a fire on the top, control that burn, and you'll get a charcoal type substance. You grind that up and that has a lot of soil benefits. Helps with filtration, not so much in the nutrient content. Most soils aren't really carbon short, but it does fix carbon in a way instead of burning it off, letting all that to escape into the atmosphere. You lock in that carbon. They use it for filtration in a lot of different respects, but they're big machines to do it on a scale, say to impact the sandhills. I was like, why am I having an issue thinking of that? In the sandhills, if you were to bring one of these huge multi-million-dollar machines up there and then logistically where you ship that finished product to, no one's really been able to crack that economically.
I was wondering, when you mentioned the children's book, if you have, I know you can't do everything, but do you do outreach to the community, outreach, environmental ed, outdoor ed? Do you have programs that you're working on with that?
Yeah, appreciate that question. So that book is Joyce Ward is the author. Excuse me. She developed that really on her own and approached our organization. What's unique about the group that I work for is what we try to do is empower the states. Administratively, there's red tape all over the place when you're trying to do conservation. So what we do behind the scenes is work with the USDA, very one-to-one relationship to make sure state wildlife agencies can provide that technical support to landowners and the money can flow seamlessly. That's something that it has its high spots in time, but Farm Bill programs aren't really known for the quick turnaround. We're trying to change that. But to your question about what education outreach activities that are out there, there's a lot of different chapters for Quail Forever, which is companion to Pheasants Forever. Again, they're embedded in a lot of areas, but there is a boots on the ground shortfall to do this kind of work that you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of 4-H or others. We have outdoor education here, prairie discovery, stuff like that. Be a valuable component. Also, I have heard starlings perfectly mimic the bobwhite call.
Right.
So when you do the whistle count, I guess
Yeah, that is maybe I can quickly go back to that. Nope, got myself turned around. There we go. The whistle count data is interesting. So this isn't by sound of ear. This is through a device called ARU, or acoustic recording unit, which detects frequency differences. Again, I'm not an avian biologist by any stretch, but that's what that's picking up on, so you minimize that error. By the ear, I would agree with you. It's like, what is a bobwhite doing in my backyard? Like that's not there.
Okay, we got one more question. We'll let Gerald up here.
I'm curious to know, how do you think the population was in pioneer times when it was in the tall grass prairie region? Because it seems like there'd be vast areas where the vegetation would be too tall and not enough woodish plum thickets and shrubs and stuff like that. Yeah, so I suspect when pioneers came here, the populations moved north farther from the south, probably, didn't they?
So I'm going to go out on a limb here, because this is not my expertise, but here's what I've learned. So grasslands, don't think of it as a monolith, right? It's all grassland. It's a mosaic. So really what would happen is areas would burn for whatever reason, lightning strike, Native American tribes set fires. I think you'd see that management happening all over this area. So it wouldn't be a monolithic. And bobwhite would move to areas that maybe had recently burned, that have that flush regrowth. They might be butted up to another area that still had a shrubby thicket that didn't. And they just shift around on the landscape over time.
But I was wondering in the north, where you have deep snow and stuff, if you had a really bad winter and wiped them out over a vast area, it seems like there'd be just a few strongholds where they would
Absolutely.
infiltrate in from.
Yeah, winter mortality, 80%. I mean, that's pretty average. Depending on the year, it can be worse than that.
So
Absolutely.
there's probably more stable populations in the south, isn't there?
Yep.
One more quick thing. In these big CRP fields, what's your thought of mowing paths so that they can cover the field and have places where they can walk without?
So this was new to me. I had never seen this before. So in this understory, again, this was Georgia. Not a good photo to probably highlight what we're talking about. They would do that exact thing. They would mow in blocks. And it was for two reasons. The dogs could run through it quicker. And then secondarily, it gave them that kind of bare ground mosaic where they could go and forage, find grit, and then still be able to escape into adjacent habitat. So again, not a biologist, but I've seen it done at least in the southeast.
But those tall plants, that looks like that invasive Sericea lespedeza. Did they plant that there for seed for the quail, or is that just out of control?
Likely out of control, but it was introduced, for other erosion control purposes. Yeah, naturalized would be my guess.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. Are we out of time? I can keep going.
Yes, well, I tell you what, let's give Kyle a round of applause. I'm sure you'll stick around for a few more minutes afterwards. Remember, we've got brownies and cookies out here. And remember, Saturday we've got the bird survey with Teresa out at 8 o'clock at Prairie Pines. Then on Sunday we've got the wellness festival from the morning from 10 to 4. And then 4 to 8 is the free concert out there. And then we've got coming up the planning, state planning. And then also we've got the Wagon Tongue Creek invitation for members and their friends and family. So be sure and check out the newsletter for all that good stuff. If you forget something or need something, call me at the office or on my cell phone. I'll try to get you up to date. But again, thanks, Kyle, and I'm sure you'll stick around for a few questions. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Just sitting there. They had me competitive. You know, just sat there like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here.
Hopefully it won't be too scary. But if you lived in a house at a concert, then that's, we're gonna volunteer so you can have food table.
Yeah.
Kind of more summer-like on Sundays.
See you Sunday.
Yeah, I guess that's what they were talking with.
Thanks for volunteering.